Yangoyo.
Eloko, la chose là.
Ototombe. Yangoyo. Mongango yangoyo, yangoyo. Mongango yangoyo, yangoyo. Tango ya koloba, oh yangoyo. Eloko elekitiama, yangoyo. Esoma bamituka, oh eloko yo. Esoma balopango, oh eloko yo. Otope mikili obene eloko yo. Eloko yango nini ye miziki. Eloko yango nini ye miziki. Nalela obiso yo, obakolo muna obiso yo. Nalela obiso yo, obakolo muna obiso yo. Lego, 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 Lego. Le 2 juillet, biso tembe na foire. Le 2 juillet, biso tembe na foire. Le 2 juillet, biso tembe na foire. Lego, 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 Lego. Moya oye, moya oye, oh, moya oye, moya oye, moya oye, oh, moya oye, oh, moya oye, moya oye. Eloko elekitiama miyangoyo, esoma bamituka, oh, eloko yo. Otope mikili obene eloko yo. Votre langue obene eloko yo. Mbongo atondo esila obene eloko yo. Eloko yango nini ye miziki. Eloko yango nini ye miziki. Nalela obiso yo, bakolo mona obiso yo. Eloko elekitiama miziki. Lego, 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 Lego. Le 2 juillet, biso tembe na foire. Le 2 juillet, biso tembe na foire. Le 2 juillet, biso tembe na foire. Lego, 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 Lego. Tango ya kopanda, oh yango yo. Tika topanda sango, oh eloko yo. Eloko elekitiama yango yo. Esoma bamituka, oh eloko yo. Motope mikili neloko yo. Yote la pea, oh neloko yo. Eloko yango nini ye miziki. Eloko yango nini yo miziki. Nalela obiso yo, bakolo mona ye biso yo. Bakolo mapinga baby so yo. Bakolo banzemo biso yo. Nalela obiso yo, bakolo mona ye biso yo. Iloko lele yo, kolela ye iloko. Iloko lela mojalengo ya bela o iloko. Bale ozana langa otonga ye iloko. Yalo kuza bonoma tobe o iloko. Eloko yango nini ye miziki. Eloko yango nini ye miziki. Miziki ye. Lego, 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 Lego. Le 2 juillet, biso tembe na foire. Le 2 juillet.
Welcome to the Courageous Pod to the Smiling Suffer Network. It's been a while. Today I have a guest with us, a very special guest. He goes by the name of Muhammed Akinyemi. And good afternoon, Mr. Muhammad.
All right. Hi, good afternoon, Famuyiwa. It's nice to be on the show today.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you, man. Just to give the audience a little bit of background, I stumbled on one of Mr. Akinyemi's works. A friend of mine had posted it on a group.
Akinyemi is just fine.
I'm sorry?
I said Akinyemi is just fine. You can take out the Mister.
Okay. So I stumbled on Akinyemi's works a few weeks ago. A friend of mine had posted. It's a series that he has. It's a series he has on Medium. It's called Nigeria's Whitewashed Heads of State, and I believe this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this particular article I'm talking about was the second in the series. Was it the second or the third? I think it was the second.
That's about the fifth or the sixth.
Oh, the fifth.
Yeah.
Oh wow! I was only able to find one other one, and I kept trying to search through Medium. So, but I'm still getting used to how to use Medium. But I only found one other one, so I just assumed it was the second. But anyway, I found this really interesting article on MKO Abiola. It's about MKO Abiola's humble beginnings, how he rose into power, and ultimately his demise, and kind of how everything played out, which is a history that I thought I already knew about. But I don't know, there was something that Akinyemi did, man, that he really went in depth with this, and he did his research, man. He even got quotes from other parties at the time, and it was just really riveting. Like, I was glued to my screen the whole time. I'm like, wow. You actually start to understand who this man MKO Abiola was. But before we even get into the article, let's get right back on Mr. on Akinyemi here. Just a little bit of background. Akinyemi is a cross-sectoral editor and writer for Hum Angle. Is that still the case? Just want to make sure.
Human Angle, yeah, I still work at Human Angle.
Human Angle, and it's this outlet that reports on human insecurity in Africa. It's a well-known publication. I understand that you've also worked and published. You also have published works with media outlets like the Nigerian Tribune, Sahara Reporters, and one of my favorites, Zikoko. I love Zikoko. Zikoko is like it's really easy reads for me on there. You also happen to be a TEDx speaker. Yeah, I'm guessing you spoke on. You mind telling us what you spoke on in the TEDx event?
Yes. So the idea of being a cross-sectoral editor and writer is that I have very diverse interests. So I cover different areas. I cover tech, I cover development, I cover insecurity. So my TEDx presentation was on space technology and how space technology can enhance the security structure in Nigeria and also support farming and other forms of agriculture. Before I moved to Human Angle, I was working as an editor at a space tech company. So I kind of had access to lots of data and run-ins of the space industry that I felt Nigeria was not really tapping into. So I just sort of I've written quite a lot about on the industry and its importance for the development of Nigeria's security structure and Nigeria's economic infrastructures. So yeah.
Interesting. And it's funny because you've written on Afrobeat too.
Yes, I have.
I mean, talk about versatility from space exploration and all this stuff to history. I mean, you've done a lot, man. And I was looking up your background online. I'm like, this guy has done a lot. Especially at such a short period too. But again, the one thing that caught my attention was this article, and I have to say, reading this article, it was like a movie. So that was how it played out in my head, Akinyemi. It was almost like I was in my mind. I was imagining like a Netflix production of this. That was the way you wrote it. It was so riveting. It was so riveting. And I'll tell you, you're one hell of a storyteller, man. That's one thing for sure. And I think this is definitely, with the series like this is definitely worth looking into. Maybe having some kind of production, like movie production or series production to go with it, man. If that time ever comes, it was really riveting. But let's get into the article. Let's get right into the article. Let's not beat around the bush. So, I started out the article, and it starts off with MKO Abiola, the year he was born, 1937. Born 23rd child. 23rd child. And his middle name is Kashimawo, which means
Yep.
let's still be looking. Let's still keep observing this kid to see if he lives. The 23rd child. A lot of our grandparents, they did this. They had multiple wives, and they'd have multiple siblings. But in his case, his father wasn't like rich or anything, right?
And it wasn't. They were really poor. They were paupers.
Yeah, they were paupers, which is interesting that he was still able to have 22 children. 23 children in MKO's case. Probably, if not more, even. And MKO was a very, very, very bright guy from the start. Like, the guy went to school. That was the one thing that he focused on. He was like a really, really, really astute student, to the point that he was able to earn himself a scholarship, and he went to the UK, right? I think it was University of Glasgow.
Yes, it was UK. Yeah, it was Glasgow.
Yeah,
in the UK.
Yeah,
Glasgow, Scotland.
Yeah, the University of Glasgow, and he went and he studied accounting, and he was really good. He was really good at this stuff. But then he moved back. Now, before he moved back, I think that was when he met his first wife, right? Symbiat?
Yes, he got married and came back with the family to Nigeria.
Yeah, and I think they had 2 kids at the time. He came back to the family in Nigeria. I think this was right around, if not, maybe right before or around the Biafra War, which started in 1967.
Just a few years
before. Yes, a few years before that. He had kind of worked his way. He started off working at one company. He moved up to another company, and he eventually ended up at I.T.T. And for those wondering, it's the same I.T.T. Fela was talking about in I.T.T. International TT. Yes, it's the same I.T.T. Yes, and which was a telecommunications company at the time, and during the war, they needed comms devices, communication devices, so they had reached out to I.T.T. and MKO. He wasn't the boss or anything, but he was one. I guess he was one of their salespeople, perhaps. He worked there. And please, Akinyemi, correct me if I say anything wrong. He worked.
Yeah, of course, I'm listening.
Yeah, he worked there, and he basically had gone to get the funds for the communication devices that he had sold the military at the time, and he had run into this one guy who was a rising military figure at the time. He was the inspector of signals at the time. Yes, and all this is sourced from Akinyemi's article. So if I get anything wrong, don't blame Akinyemi. But it was the inspector of signals, who happened to be this young guy called Murtala Mohammed, the person that our famed airport is named after.
The man on the 20 naira note.
Yes, the man on the 20 naira note. Some people I've heard this argument before, and I know what you think about it, but some people have argued that he may have been our most benevolent dictator that we ever had.
There is a whitewashed Heads of State episode on Murtala Mohammed.
Oh, really?
He's the most whitewashed person in Nigerian post-colonial history.
Interesting. He happened to be the one that had led the coup at the time, the previous coup.
So the way I describe Murtala Mohammed is just towards genocidal maniac.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. So, but for some reason, his history was whitewashed to make him look like he was a hero of sorts. I guess because from what I heard, he had done a lot to kind of clean up a lot of the corruption when he came in at the time, right?
So people confused for cleaning up corruption was really the most the most fraudulent and unfair miscarriage of open quote justice in Nigeria. So instead of resolving the problem, he just fired people at will. You don't support us, you're fired. It just came and it just cleared people. And instead of going through the proper procedure or admitting that some of those firings were wrongly done, they just grouped everybody under the tag corruption, or we want to clear corruption. But that really wasn't what happened. But I mean, Nigerians went with it and the story stuck.
Interesting. It's funny because he's still beloved among some people in some circles in Lagos. But that's a series for another day. You know, I'm hoping we can talk about all of the series that you have. But moving on to this, he ran into Murtala, and Murtala was inspector of signals at the time, and MKO was like, you know, you guys are owing us money, man. And with Murtala was like, there was a particular quote. Murtala said, "Who the hell are you? I'll kill you." And then MKO said, "If you touch me, I'll beat the hell out of you." MKO, you see, there was this running theme in MKO where he was just this stubborn guy that he put his mind to something, he was going to get his way.
He's going to get, yeah.
He was just, and this is, keep in mind for you guys, listen, this is, he's going against someone that had just led a coup. Some people describe this, at least you describe this as almost suicidal. He's going up to this man telling him that you guys owe us money.
And at that point, although Murtala was inspector of signals, but at that point, he was practically the person controlling the Yakubu Gowon administration. He would go on missions as an officer, without informing his superiors, and he would just stomp into Federal Executive Council meetings without invite, and there would be no repercussions. So that was the person MKO Abiola was saying.
Wow!
if you touch me, I'll beat the hell out of you. And so yeah, that was some balls on him.
Yeah, and keep in mind, these guys were young. These guys were in their 30s. At least MKO was in his 30s at this time. Which is funny because you look at it, like these guys were running society at the time. They were in their 30s. And you compare it to today where it's like it's the same people from those people that are still running society. They haven't even given up any ounce of power. It's unfortunate, but that's another story for another day. So he goes up to this guy and tells him and pretty much insists to the point that they kind of respect him for the balls that he had. Like, this guy really, really walked up to us and is demanding his money. I think he eventually got it, right? They eventually relinquished those funds.
He did.
But that wasn't where it ended, man. MKO was the way he got into power at I.T.T is very, very controversial. You know, we all just assumed he just rose up the ranks, and that wasn't the case. This man finessed his way into power. Is that fair to say, Akinyemi?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really, I think depending on who is narrating it's not, what he did was not criminal, right?
No, it wasn't. It
was just a moral situation.
Morally questionable.
Morally right?
Yes.
Or was it morally wrong?
Yes. Which is why I said he finessed. If you notice, I didn't use the word conned. Because con is what I would naturally use, but I'm like, okay, to be fair, he finessed his way into it. And basically the way it worked out was that he had found his boss at the time, which was a white man, was a very useless guy, womanizer, was always drinking. So he had an investigator take pictures, compromising pictures of him. And MKO went back to his bosses in London, because I guess I.T.T was like an international subsidiary, right? That just happened to be operating in Nigeria. Went to this man's bosses, his boss's bosses. Went to them in London and snitched on him and showed them pictures of this guy womanizing and doing all sorts of nonsense
in the office. And obviously the guy got fired.
And MKO was like, well, you know, I want you guys to put me in charge as regional. He pretty much demanded he put in charge as. He had this very I guess the best word to use is very entitled manner about him. Is that fair to say? It was almost like he came in, he got rid of the
he
guy.
just had audacity.
Like this audacity. Like
MKO has the audacity of a white man in Africa.
as in this man, and this is he had so much audacity. He demanded that he get this role, and they wouldn't give him the role. So eventually he leaves, right? So he formed his own company, and he convinced the executives at I.T.T that he already secured a $30 million contract. $30 million is not beans. Back at this time, this was like early 70s or so.
30 million pounds.
Sorry, 30 million pounds. That's a lot of money. He convinced them that he had secured this thing and that he was leaving with it. And he said the only way he would stick around is if they sold him the I.T.T shares at what you would consider a discount, which they did. But he didn't have a contract. He did not have a contract. He had nothing. He was bluffing. And he somehow finessed his way into owning a significant proportion of this company. And then, obviously, he went on to get more contract. Now, I don't know how that ended up. I don't know if they eventually found him out. I don't know if you want to share with us what happened with that, how he was able to kind of escape.
I mean, the way, so a little bit of backstory, right? I don't know if you've heard about the Festus Kuti, but it was Nigeria's minister in the First Republic.
I have heard of his name. I've heard of his name, yes, but I don't know him.
Yeah, so if people talk about in Nigeria institutionalizing contract corruption, it was Festus who made that thing happen in Nigeria, right? So the model
he was like the pioneer of corruption.
Contract corruption.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the model that Festus introduced was just what MKO and Co alleged on. So basically, you get a contract through your friend, you settle people, you execute the contract, and you share the rest of the money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when one of the reasons Fela was really pissed and did the I.T.T song was because he knew the intricacies of these dealings.
Oh.
So the idea was someone's friend would tell them there's a contract coming. Typically, yes, people are supposed to bid for contracts.
Yeah.
But you tell your friend, oh, there's a contract, there's a project you want to work on. You tell your friend drops a certain percentage for you,
yeah, and
then your company gets the contract. You, who has done the corrupt part of getting the contract, you get your certain percentage too.
Yeah.
So what I.T.T thought Abiola had because of his military alliances,
mm-hmm.
After he and Muritala had that fight, he got close to Muritala,
mm-hmm.
Babangida, and the likes.
Yeah.
So what they thought he had was because he had that privileged access. They thought he had secured the deal, right? Mm-hmm. So when they realized that he had not, it was too late, and it wasn't to the point of illegality, Yeah. I mean, a lot of things that he did tilted. They were immoral, but they weren't to a very huge. I mean, how do you go to court to go argue that you entered the contract with someone and the contract was basically on corruption? It would. Yeah. I mean, eventually they might get him to rescind some money, but it would affect the company's image too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But because he had that access to the military anyway, and the military was still in power, so they kept him around so that he could run things. And of course, it worked out because in 1974. When the Ministry of Communications wanted to execute some contract, then they had I think it was Theophilus Akindele and Co. So that was when they announced that they say, oh, let's reach out to our boy now, and then Abiola got I think in all the contract was estimated at about $1 billion.
Yes, I saw that.
So keeping Abiola around despite his ridiculousness paid off for I.T.T and it wasn't because I.T.T was the best. They weren't like the best persons to execute, but I mean they had Abiola and they had corruption going for them.
They had access to power. Yeah. That's what it was. And he went on to buy his first airplane.
He did.
And he flew his dad in that airplane.
Man,
can you imagine owning he eventually owned an airline, right? Did he?
Was it like
Well, was it the owner
that detail is?
of Concorde
Oh,
Airlines? Oh, no. I'm sorry. I'm
no,
I'm
it was
confusing with
Concord
something.
newspapers,
It was
but
Concorde
he had
newspapers.
plane.
Yes, but he
Yeah,
did have his plane.
yeah,
Wow,
he did.
wow. And that was what birthed this. I guess you'd call him like a businessman, where he ended up creating more companies, more successful companies. He created that Concord newspaper. Um, there were a bunch of other companies that he was able to create. He pretty much became a wealthy man,
Yeah, he
and a
did
lot
a
of it
lot.
had
He
to do
just he
with
just had tons. He had newspaper. He
yes,
had investments in banks. He had
yes.
investments in airlines. Actually, I think it was Concord Airlines or something. But it wasn't
Yeah,
like it wasn't a really big deal.
yeah.
But yeah, he had investments
He
in.
did.
And then at some point, he started going into maritime, and he had some investments in maritime. So yeah,
Yeah, she became a very wealthy man, and a lot of it was his smarts, because this guy was a smart guy, but a lot of it
yep,
was also his access to power and being in the
yeah,
right
yeah,
place, and also
yeah.
his audacity. Let's just call it what it is. He had a lot of courage just to step up and just be able to convince people. That was something that he seemed to have at the time, and the years went by, and allegedly he may have supported and may have even financed some of the coups that happened afterwards, right? But there was this one particular coup, very very key coup, that we know he definitely financed. But prior to that, he had started building his political aspirations, and I think it was in the early '80s where he had joined MPN, right, which was Shehu Shagari's party, and Shehu Shagari was the president at the time. And we all know Shagari for being a very, very corrupt individual. It was really bad. It was what motivated the military to come and actually do that coup that Babangida came into power with. But it's known.
So,
Sorry,
a
go ahead.
brief digression on Shehu Shagari. I think the slightly close modern comparable leader that you can use for Shehu Shagari was Jonathan, right? So it wasn't that Shehu Shagari himself was corrupt; was just incompetent. So
Okay.
there was this meeting, right, where they were discussing government contract and executions. And Shehu Shagari left. The president left the cabinet meeting to go pray. He came back, they said, "Oh, we've signed the contract," and just say, "Yeah, go ahead. You can imagine the president of a nation leaving a cabinet meeting to go do salat, and he comes back and they tell the president that, "Oh, we have decided this and that," and he just says, "Yes, go ahead." So that was his problem, right? And the most corrupt person and I really, really despise Buhari because he let this man go scot-free. The most corrupt person under Shehu Shagari's regime administration was Umaru Diko. Umaru Diko served in different positions and eventually was he finance minister or agri minister or something. But there was this in the 80s, Nigeria was going through a really, really tough time, and the Nigerian government said, "Okay, let's get rights for people, right, so that we can reduce the austerity in the land."
Yeah.
Umaru Diko intercepted that deal, removed it. So it was supposed to be free rice for citizens. Umaru Diko got the deal, intercepted the rice, and they started selling the rice to people who were already poor. So the money for the deal was corruption laden. The deal itself, the rice itself that was supposed to be free, they also made mad money out of it. So it's Shehu Shagari was just grossly incompetent, and he just liked wearing his designer clothes and looking flashy and all. But corruption, it was his ministers that his incompetence allowed to breed that,
Wow.
allowed it to fester.
So, MK had joined MPN at the time. I think it was the early '80s, and he was hoping to succeed Shehu Shagari. Was that what happened? And they had some kind of disagreement?
So during Shehu Shagari's first tenure, right, when MKO joined the party as a big man, businessman, he wanted more. You can never be satisfied when you get to a certain level. So he wanted more. He wanted to be president, but it was Shehu Shagari's turn.
Yeah.
So MKO stayed in the party. MKO, Obafemi Awolowo ran against Shehu Shagari, right? And MKO used Concord newspaper and lots of other funding sources to discredit Obafemi Awolowo in hopes that, this thing that Tinubu are doing nowadays, that they're saying party structure, followed party structure.
Yeah.
He was willing to be on the side of whatever was right or wrong, as long as it benefited him in the name of party structure. So he was in support of that party structure because the party was supposed to rotate presidency to the West after Shagari. Shagari was supposed to do just one tenure.
Yes.
But toward the end of Shagari's first term, Shagari wanted a second term, and when it became obvious to Abiola, he left the party angrily, and he became Abiola wanting to become president. It really started as an ego boost, and because of the circumstances of the journey, it became a vendetta thing for him. Like, you people wanted to throw me out, I'm going to show you that I can do it outside of your party. And that really was it.
He seemed to have a chip on his shoulder constantly. A huge chip on his shoulder. Like this, despite becoming a rich man, it's almost like he felt like these people they're playing with me, man. Like, it's almost like he always needed to prove something. It didn't matter how rich he got.
Although it was never documented by it was never calculated by any publication, but at some point MKO said he was claiming for a long time that he was the richest man in Africa. And then it was them Dan Tata and the likes that had the kind of wealth that he had. And the MK was much more flamboyant, had more access to power, to more resources than a lot of people. So yeah, arguably at that point, this was the richest man in Africa.
Wow.
Telling you that the money wasn't enough. He wanted to become the president of the most populous African nation. It was just really crazy.
It really was. And some people would argue that he went against his own people in his pursuit of this power. He went against Awolowo, one of the most respected people within the Yoruba ethnic group, and they held it against him for some time, and we'll get to that later. But people didn't forget that. But long story, of course not. No, Yorubas know how to hold a grudge. That's the one thing that we know how to do. We can hold a grudge. But so he decided to back this coup that got rid of Shehu Shagari and eventually installed IBB. And IBB was one of his boys from way back, including Abacha too, happened to be one of his boys. And IBB was in power. We know how IBB's regime went. He stole a whole lot. He siphoned a whole lot. He's considered the evil genius.
Maradona.
Yeah, he outwitted a lot of people too. Mamagani was a smart guy, and but he had people like MKO that he worked closely with, and Babangida had decided at some point that he was going to give back this power to the people. He was going to usher us back into a democracy. And MKO was one of his boys. But what they did, and this is very sinister, and people knew at the time, but they told everyone that had been in politics before, they can't qualify for this role, for this new presidency. Pretty much they wanted someone new that had never been in politics before. So MKO obviously was not allowed. Then what they did was they shrunk it down to two parties, kind of like how they do here in the United States. Republicans, Democrats. They pretty much shrink your choices to two choices. And those two choices are people that they've backed, that they know that,
In fact, everybody on both ends of the parties were either friends, acquaintances, or uncles to get to Babangida.
Yep.
So it wasn't like it was for the people, it was for our people.
Yes. And they created SDP NRC. Eventually, MKO appealed, and he was able to get qualified, of course, because that's his boy, IBB. Of course, he's going to get qualified to run. So it was MKO Abiola, and he was running under SDP. And I remember this moment because at this time, my uncle who had been in the United States, he came back down, and he was working on the campaign, on MKO's campaign. And I remember having all this MKO campaign paraphernalia all over our house back then. It was exciting times, man. It was MKO Abiola that was running for the primaries, right, for the SDP. MKO Abiola, Atiku Abubakar, and there was one other person. Do you remember who? I forget who now.
It was MKO Abiola, Atiku Abubakar, and I think Babagana Kinibe, who eventually became the vice president.
King Gibe. So MKO eventually won the nomination, and at the time, Yar'Adua was like he was the head of that party, and Yar'Adua, pretty much one of the concessions that Yar'Adua wanted MKO to make was that he would put his guy Atiku as his VP.
Yeah,
Babangida too had his own pick for MKO as his VP. I forgot who it was, but Babangida also had someone that he wanted MKO to put under him, and it was going to be a northerner regardless.
Yeah.
What did MKO do? What did MKO do?
So MKO looked at. I mean, both were kind of his friends. He when they kicked him out of NPN, when he kicked himself out of NPN, it was SDP that accepted him. And so let's SDP then is like APC now, right?
Yes.
We have the ACN faction, we have the ANPP faction, and the likes. So SDP also had like multiple factions, right? Mm-hmm. But the faction that had the most influence in the party was the faction that Yar'Adua was in.
Yeah.
So that faction was the faction that dropped Atiku. But at that point, MKO Abiola was the more popular candidate, but he had to still go against the rebels faction, and that was the one Kinibe was representing, right?
Yeah.
So after they did the first round of their primaries, Yar'Adua saw that, look here, man, this thing get us to be. So MKO Abiola and Shehu Yar'Adua met, and they reached a gentleman's agreement that Atiku Abubakar would step down from the second round. So it's going to be all of Atiku Abubakar's support will go to MKO Abiola so that they can defeat Kinibe. Yes. In return, Atiku will be named the VP. Because Babangida still wanted power. He wanted, even when he set up the interim government, the people he left in the military to support the interim government were his boys. So even though Babangida made everyone believe, Maradona now, he made everyone believe that he wanted to leave power in good faith, he wanted to go retire in Niger. That man still wanted to control Nigeria. He still wanted to have influence and power. So he wanted, everybody knew, the relationship they had with MKO Abiola made it clear that MKO Abiola wasn't someone you could just make a phone call and control.
Yeah.
It wasn't the kind of person that you could tell, sit down there, and he would sit down there. So they needed other people in his government that they could control if they needed things done. And that was why everybody was trying to, slot in their VP candidate. But instead of going for Babangida or Yar'Adua's recommendation, MKO Abiola just said, you know what, damn it. So he picked the person that contested against him, Kinibe, and Kinibe became his vice presidential candidate. It was such an insane move. And it was an insane move for so many reasons. MKO Abiola is a Muslim Yoruba man. Kinibe is a Muslim Northerner. The person that was the last democratic government was led by an Hausa Northerner, or a Muslim Northerner, sorry.
Yeah.
And the people afterward were Northerners who were Muslim, even though they were military dictators. They had Buhari and then Bangida. So it was time for things to switch around, right? They were looking for at least, if not a Southerner to be somewhere. There should be Christian representation. But the Southerner in that setting was Abiola, and he was Muslim. So expectedly, it should be, pick someone from the East who was a Christian, or pick someone from maybe North Central who was Christian. But instead, this guy said, no, I get coconut head. I know the year was.
And he picked King Bay. And
He took
and
him
I
in there
think and I
said,
think
"You
and I
do
think
whatever you're going
I
to
think
do."
but I think that may have been his first slip up. It wasn't what caused everything else, but I think that might have been his first chink in his
I
armor.
mean,
That
politically,
move.
that was something that happened that really just. I mean, they were telling Babangida at that point, especially people like David Mark, who MKO had threatened that he was going to punish once he became president. So they were telling Babangida that when this guy becomes president, that you can't control him. And before he even became president, he was already showing that
He was already
you
trying to
can't control me.
move his muscle, like pull his muscle. He was already threatening people, telling people that they were going to get locked up, and he wasn't even in power yet. The hubris.
How do you have a fight with
hubris.
someone that you are telling them that wait until I become president?
Can you imagine? Can you imagine? And then you now go ahead and then decide to just pick your own VP, disregarding all everyone else's picks. He didn't even pick a side. He just decided I was going to do my own thing. The hubris. But then he goes on to win this election with King Igbe, and the apparently it was like 35% turnout. I didn't even know that. It was very low turnout. But even for back then, it's still a turnout, because prior to that, it's not like we really had any like really fair elections. But this, according to most observers, was considered the fairest election as of the time. And there's this particular quote that you have of, just to give people a sense of where people were at the time, how desperate they were. There was a quote that he gave of Wole Soyinka on why he voted for MKO. He said, "This Nigeria had stopped looking for a messiah light eons ago, and all she seeks is a good manager. The Nigeria I know does not care if such an individual is a cross-eyed hunchback, a knock-kneed womanizer, or a homosexual atheist, animist, Muslim, or Christian born again. The Nigeria I know lays only one condition on credentials of such a hybrid. He or she must be democratically elected." And that was all we wanted. We just wanted someone that at least we know that we picked, even though it was presented to us, but we know that we picked that person. And at the time, it was considered the fairest election at the time.
So I actually, after I did this story, right, yes. I was having an argument with someone regarding the free and fair status of it, and then the popularity of the so-called popularity of Abiola. And I actually went to check the 1979 elections and compare the numbers to that of the 1989 election. Uh-huh. Even though MKO had more popularity because of the circumstances, right? Mm-hmm. Shagari won. He had the higher number.
Oh, okay.
And Shagari contested against two prominent Nigerians. He contested against Awolowo and Zikiwe. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine someone contesting against Nigeria's first a former premier, Nigeria's first executive president, and he won. So if you look at it statistically, right, from the data point of view, what Shagari did was even much more human, and we were coming out of a military rule too. So what he did was much more humongous compared to
MKO.
What MKO did. But MKO was a very sensational person. When MKO does something, people know that MKO has done something. So
bombastic.
People. He was an entertainer, really. Of course, he funded some part of his education with his entertainment. This man even did jingles for his own. He did jingles by himself for his campaign.
Well, he wrote his own jingles. Wow.
MKO now, singer, drummer guy.
Wow.
He did. So he had life about him, and people just really wanted to participate in this buzzing camaraderie that MKO had brought. So that really was it. So it's eventually, of course, the claim that it was the freest and fairest election has been debunked with data showing that they spent a lot of money. There was intimidation here and there.
Yeah,
people were forced to stay indoors. But yeah, what Soyinka said was right. Because of Babangida's behavior and the way he had been playing Nigerians around with the wanting to leave, I'm leaving in 2 years, I'm leaving in 3 years. Nigerians just wanted democracy. Like, enough, you don't do. You people have tried. Desperate. Oh yeah, come on, be going. So MKO really was not. MKO was a representation of that frustration against the military. It wasn't because MKO was pure or he was ideal. But I think why the stories are important to be told as a whole is that when people talk about MKO, when they talked about him in the spirit of the election, like the gist of the election, and afterward, people talk about MKO as if he was some messiah. MKO was not a messiah. He was part of the institution that he was claiming to be pushing out of power.
He was.
Right.
He was.
So he was just a
in many ways
of people's frustration.
But in many ways, he did also contribute to the oppression of Nigerians. Let's be honest.
So there are even allegations that he was aware of David Giwa's murder, but that's another story entirely.
That's another story for another day. That's another story for another day. But yeah, man. So he went on to win the election, but there was this one group. This really, and this is very key to the story, because when he first brought this up, I'm like, oh, why are we bothering about this group?
Talking about it.
It was called the Association for Better Nigeria. It's like imagine the whole country is on this wave of democracy, but this one group, and they happen to be headed by a non-military guy called Arthur Nzeribe. Association of Better Nigeria. These people, they decided, Coconut Head decided, we do not want to hand over the government to a democratically elected president. We want to keep military rule. Can you give us like a background of what this group was about? Because I have my suspicions. I feel like this group was put in place ultimately by the military regime, and they just put a civilian at the head of it as a dummy. But please, can you give us a little bit of background about this group, Association of Better Nigeria? They kept suing to stop the election and to not declare a winner for the election.
So a little background on the man who founded Association for Better Nigeria. Otto Nzeribe is a businessman and politician. Right, and this is what is surprising. So Otto Nzeribe was a Third Republic senator, right?
Yeah.
And because Nigeria was incompetence and bad behavior, Otto Nzeribe went on to contest for another senatorial seat in 1999, and he won.
Okay.
So Otto Nzeribe represented, I think it was Olu.
Okay.
Senatorial district for between 1999 and 2007. So he had two terms.
Yeah.
So Otto Nzeribe's role was, as has been seen over the years, with more evidence surfacing, and that was something they did not have up for them. Now there's information. When something happens somewhere, there's ICT and social media. When something happens somewhere, we talk about it. It goes viral. Everybody knows what's popping immediately. But then it wasn't like that. Yeah. So when them Otto Nzeribe were performing, because it was a performance, the simple thing was Otto Nzeribe and co were being sponsored by certain people. Some have alleged that it was Abacha, some have alleged that it was the David Mark faction of the military.
Yeah.
But the more plausible understanding was Otto Nzeribe was just someone who wanted to make money because it's an opportunity. And Abacha played into his corny behavior. And because Abacha is a stupid person. Like even Babangida said Abacha no good. Like the way he describes Abacha is someone who does not have sense. But if Sani wants to do something, you better be afraid, because Sani is going to get it done.
He's very, very
Sani might not,
ruthless.
He might not know how to kill without a trace. But if Sani wants to kill you, he's going to kill you.
Yeah.
He does not care what people think about it. I mean, we saw what he did with Sariwiwa and co.
Yeah.
But one of the few times that Abacha and co might have shown some level of intellect was probably around that Nzeribe issue, when ABN went to court that this election was not hold and the election held. So because there was a case, and another important aspect of it was that, so Maradona prided himself as some grandmaster chess player,
Yeah.
But it was outplayed by his guys. And for a long time, he did not realize it. So the judge that sat on ABN's case was imported. Like they took the judge from one state in the south, took him to, I think, was it Lagos or Abuja then, to go, sit on the case and just So it was a lot of underground workings from different people who did not want MKO to become president. And it was just one plan falling over the other. It's like someone is planning for you to die, and then they see the enemy of my enemy, basically.
Yes.
So there were lots of enemy of my enemy situations that worked against MKO Abiola and co.
Mm-hmm.
And that was why Otto Nzerebe was very instrumental.
Yes.
In fact, as at the point of Babangida annulling the election, even though at that point it was clear that MKO had won, the one of the strong points they used for the annulment was, oh look, there's a litigation. This election has been marred by violence and this and that.
Wow.
And I can't in good conscience say that the election was right when there's a litigation going on. So it really was just this and that and this and that.
Wow.
So Otto Nzerebe just wanted to make some money and some clout for himself, and some people in the military who saw
just happened to just seize that. Wow.
They just grabbed it, and it just happened as it happened.
Yeah. So this is 93, right? So everything just gets put on hold essentially. They don't declare a president. There was this quote that you had of Abacha. Abacha was reported to have said, "Abiola, retire me, God forbid." Meanwhile, MKO Abiola was still moving around. In fact, to the point that he was in favor of Abacha, coming in as an interim government. He was full of so much hubris. He was convinced that this thing was eventually going to get handed to him, right?
Exactly.
There was a point when Babangida almost felt like his hands were tied, and this was something that I didn't really know. I didn't know the intricacies of what happened. I just thought Babangida and Abacha, they were boys. Babangida knew from the get-go that he was going to hand it over to Abacha, but that's not really how it played out. He was pressured into this, and a lot of the military people, a lot of the military leadership, a lot of them did not want to hand over power, and there were a lot more that didn't want to hand over power than Babangida realized. But Babangida had already put out this statement of wanting to hand over. So Babangida's ego was also in play here. Like, he wanted to be able to say, "Look, I delivered on this promise that I had." But there was a lot of pressure. There was this one quote that you had where you said, I think it was Omorui, Babangida's aide, which is funny because one of his kids went to my school. This Omorui guy. And I remember his son, fat, big boy. This guy he used to travel all the time. But this guy, Omorui, Babangida's aide and political advisor, would recount a visit to Babangida in which he said Babangida was a different man. He was very, very different. Morose, curled in one corner of the sofa. In his account, Omorui said Babangida told him, "They will kill me. They will kill the president-elect, Chief MKO Abiola, if I went ahead with the election and announced the winner." I mean, that was the kind of pressure that he was put under. On June 23rd, eventually the election was annulled. June 23rd of 1993. So there was this period where we're in this like transition period, right, where nothing was really going on. Well, I guess was there like a Babangida had handed over to this interim military government. Now, but here's another key thing that I forgot to mention. The plan was for MKO to be president and for us to still have a head of state, right? Was that the plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the head of state was supposed to be Abacha.
That was the plan.
Yes. And the head of state was supposed to be Abacha. So I think in MKO's head, he was thinking that, they're still going to hand over this thing to me. Can you just kind of walk us through from this period up until the next year when eventually, MKO Abiola came out to declare himself president?
So in Nigeria's history, Sani Abacha, before he became head of state, Sani Abacha made 3 announcements. The first one was when he announced that Buhari had become the head of state and the military had taken over in December 1993.
Oh, he said Buhari.
1983, 4-ish.
Oh, yes. Okay,
that was the first time.
Okay. Oh, so he was one that made the announcement then
Yeah,
Oh,
that
okay.
was the very first time. Until then, nobody knew. Abacha was always present for all the coup. They could not execute coup without Abacha. But no Nigerians, the average Nigerians, they don't know Abacha. So the very first time Abacha made any public pronouncement was that time. So the second time is the very key one, right?
Mhm.
So during at the peak of Babangida's regime, there was a coup by Gideon Oka and co.
Yes.
Right? And the coup was successful to an extent. In fact, Babangida was scared. Babangida thought that was the end for him. That was how close he was. It was Sani Abacha who took boys and overwhelmed the coup plotters.
Wow.
So Babangida was not just owing Abacha a loyalty as a friend. He was
Even
owing
his
Abacha
life.
his life.
His life, yeah.
So typically, when other military leaders, as Obasanjo had exemplified, when you want to uh, return power to democracy, you have to retire all senior military officers. You have to. It's like leaving the lamb with the wolf. It
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Doesn't yeah.
What Obasanjo did during his time was he picked a weekend. I think it was a Thursday-ish that fell. It was a week. It was one of those long weekends that had Eid celebration or something.
Yeah.
And they sent letters to different people that they had retired though. So before they came back from the long weekend, I mean, most of them would have to travel home to their families in different parts of Nigeria.
Yeah.
So and then FCT was Lagos. So before they returned from wherever they went to in the north, in the east, and whatnot, the letter had already been submitted. You could not meet Obasanjo to discuss anything with it. They just go to the office on I think Monday or Tuesday and realize that they started moving things out of your
Yeah.
office
They've been
because
retired.
you've
Forceful
been
retirement.
retired.
Yeah.
But interestingly, when Babangida was getting toward the end of his regime, right?
Mhm.
There were certain, in fact, throughout Babangida's eight-year regime, there were times when he would randomly just wake up and retire people. He would reshuffle the military council.
Mhm.
But one person was never touched, and it was Abacha.
Oh wow, that was his guy. That was
So it
his.
was clear. Like how are you the GCON of the country, the supreme military chief, and Abacha was holding about 4 different military positions at that time. Abacha was chief of defense. It was this. It was that. Abacha was everything. And it was in compensation for saving his life, but it was not enough, right?
Mhm.
Abacha had made it clear that he wanted to become this power that you people have had that you are giving me. It was even a very silly move, right? That you have a full star general
Yeah.
who had never skipped the rank. This man had been in the military long enough, had fought in wars, unlike them, Muritala Mohamed died early, or Buhari who barely fought in anything, or even Obasanjo barely fought in anything. I mean, Obasanjo had some battles, but he was an engineer, so it wasn't like he was a fighter per se. But
Okay.
Abacha was, when it comes to getting people murdered, Abacha was a key man. That was why it was difficult to even plan any coup without. And Abacha was very close, the same way Murtala Mohammed had influence and was very close to lower ranking officers and even non-commissioned officers.
Yeah.
Abacha had that level of influence. But what's his name? Babangida had been removed from that. It was disconnected from the roots.
Mm.
So even if Abacha just woke up one morning and decided I wanted to take over, he could take over easily and Babangida would be helpless.
Yeah.
So he was rotating everybody. He would retire some people, but Abacha stayed. So the understanding at that point from his body language was he was keeping Abacha so that Abacha could succeed him.
Yes.
But because Nigeria started protesting and there was this and that and this and that, it was difficult to say, okay, bye-bye, let's go Abacha. So what he did instead was, after he annulled the election, he now set up an interim government with Shoneko. It was the worst thing that could have happened to anybody. I don't know why Shoneko accepted it. It was the worst possible. Like Abacha called Shoneko into an office. The first time Nigeria had a situation like that was in 1966 after the Cardinal Zogu coup, where they just called top security chiefs into the office and say, okay, this is the situation now. The military has to take over for good measure. That was basically what Abacha did to Shoneko. He just called him into a boardroom and told him that he had to sign that he was willingly, was willfully giving away, ceding power to Abacha, and that the military could take over. Because at that point, people were protesting. They did not want Shone consequences. Nobody wanted interim government. We had voted.
Yeah.
And the person who voted for had won. Announced this person, let his administration begin. So the interim national government idea was just ridiculous to lots of Nigerians then. So instead of announcing, Maradona, as a last-ditch attempt to, save his neck, announced the ING and put Abacha in charge of protecting the ING.
Wow.
That was the person the ING was supposed to be protected from.
I know.
So because at that point, most of the officers, top ranking of like them, David Mark and co,
Yeah.
they were, I don't know, governors, ministers, and like so people who were at the supreme level did not have no, there was no other person. Not even Babangida had the level of access to power that Abacha had. So you don't leave Abacha with Shoneko, who was a diplomat, politician, who understands next to nothing about dealing with hard guys like that.
Mm-hmm.
So he left him in charge, and they just invited Shoneko into the office and said, "Baba, oh yeah, come and resign." And he had no choice because it was either the pen or the gun.
Or the gun, yeah.
So he resigned when they even gave him a plane to take him to his hometown in Ogun State, and that was it. So at that point, MKO, so because of the double-faced behavior of Babangida, MKO was starting to lean more towards Abacha as padi more than he was towards Babangida.
Okay.
Right. So the understanding to MKO, who was as ridiculously smart as was ridiculously stupid.
Like, how did he not realize what the heck was going on? It was like this man was still here, like openly coming out, and he declared himself president, which was a huge mistake. But even before that happened,
my guy was expecting was Abacha would just come, send the ING away, and then give power to him.
Give him power. Are you not paying attention? Are you not paying attention? There was another quote you had here. This was from David Mark, where he said, this was Brigadier General David Mark, who said, "I'd shoot Chief Abiola the day NEC pronounces him the elected president." I mean, people were not messing with MKO Abiola like that. And it was almost like he was in his own bubble to an extent. There was another really, really key thing that happened during this course. So MKO came out, he declared himself president. Abacha was like, oh, no. We have to roll you back in. So they eventually arrested him, right? They didn't put him in a prison. They put him in a house arrest. They put him in house arrest, said just wait there. There was another key thing that happened that I want you to talk about. It was the Yoruba oligarchs, the Yoruba people from the Yoruba nation. And they had come out initially in defense of MKO Abiola, but then there were times where they contradicted themselves. They weren't all on the same page. Can you explain what really happened with that? Like, why didn't they seem to have a consistent message in regards to upholding the results of the election?
So even as a Yoruba person, a person of Yoruba descent, I always find it hilarious when Yoruba people try to claim that they have some level of intellectual superiority that no other tribe in Nigeria has, because they are the most politically, Yorubas are the most intellectually
opportunistic.
Opportunistic and stupid that's it.
Yeah.
So a lot of these problems were really caused by Abiola, right?
Mm-hmm.
Abiola was also being double-faced. Yes. One day you are doing meeting with Abacha, you are being photographed with Abacha. The next day you are meeting youth leaders and agitators, telling them to protest, to support you are meeting people to protest and support, to demand for your candidacy to be affirmed. While you are also meeting the person who is saying that, my friend, go and sit down. So Abiola himself was the reason for a lot of the double-faced behavior. But yeah, Abacha had made it clear right? From the moment I don't know. Abacha made the most badass pronouncement ever. I don't like Abacha,
Yeah, well, I
but that
remember that.
pronouncement
There's a recording.
is
It's
that pronouncement Abacha made is the most badass pronouncement any military leader has made in Africa.
talk about
Abacha comes, and that was the third time Abacha would make a pronouncement in Nigeria.
putting down
Abacha,
the hammer. The guy said
that
he
man
just
just
came in.
He said everything was you are protesting, don't come to work. You are this cancelled, political parties cancelled, everything cancelled. Anybody that was going to be you were going to cause any form of problem, cancelled. Like everything was suspended. No, he made it clear from that very first minute that
He
look here,
wasn't
guys,
playing around.
I'm not here for the short term game.
I'm here
for the long term.
He came and he was the evil dictator from that point on. He said, "Look, this is my thing now. Forget about anything that you guys had going on. This is my
sorry.
This is so you know that meme where the guy comes in and goes, "I'm the captain now." That was
Look at me. I'm the captain.
I'm the captain. That was his "I'm the captain"
did.
moment. Like, forget it. And he eventually, so he put MKO on house arrest. Again, like I said, the Yoruba oligarchs, they seem to not necessarily always be on the same page too. There was some confusion there. 1 minute they will come out in support, next minute they won't necessarily be in support. And part of that too probably had to do with the fact that Abiola never really embedded himself in Yoruba nation like that. You know, he had always.
So it was a lot of things, and people don't really talk about Oladipo Diya a lot, but Oladipo Diya suffered greatly because of Abiola's behavior. Oladipo Diya was, for the most part, it was Abacha's vice president.
Yes.
Right. And this is something that a lot of people do not know, did not take cognizance of. The very first administration, the very first cabinet that Abacha set up with his ministers and whatnot, a lot of people in that cabinet were nominated by Abiola. Mm-hmm. So there was Abiola's double-faced nature, right? There was Abiola's arrogance. When they put him under house arrest, there were people who were trying to. There was Nadeko, there was Afenifere.
Yes.
Like there were just different interest groups trying to say, let us protect this. Let us protect this person. Let's protect what this person stands for, and let us get this thing back. But the person they were trying to protect was also showing that he was friends with the enemy, right? I agree you guys have had something in the past, but at that point, it was no longer about you. It was about the country and,
yes,
protecting the people's interest. But Abiola made it clear that, well, his interest was first to his friends and his personal, desires. So one day you would wake up, this man is here, the next day is there. And that reflected in how the Yorubas also showed their support to him.
Yeah.
Because one day you are friends with this person, you are supporting this person, and then the next day you wake up and there are Abacha boys in front of your door. People are getting bombed. People are getting murdered.
Yes.
And Abiola was smiling and drinking tea with Abacha.
Yeah,
so it was risky business. And constantly wanting to support Abiola, who was always seen with Abacha.
Yes. It's like
so you don't really know if you
could
really
fully trust him.
Self-preserve. Exactly. A lot of them just wanted to self-preserve.
Yes.
If Abiola had said, "Oh, I'm with Abacha," and he stood by it, it would have been understandable. If he had said, I'm fighting for my mandate," and he stood by it, it would have been understandable. But it was there. So people just really wanted to self-preserve, and a lot of people really stood by Abiola, apart from the ordinary Nigerians. A lot of people who stood by Abiola at that point were also interested in the fact that if this man eventually gets his mandate, we say go chop our own. For instance, Tinubu became Abiola's de facto, PA secretary and whatnot.
Yes.
Because Tinubu wanted power too at that point. And he had just been elected for his own senatorial district. But he wanted some sort of, imagine you're a senator and you have, bills to submit and whatnot.
Yes.
No, Tinubu was finishing his senatorial whatever then. That was, he had just won. Okay. He had just won. So imagine you're a senator and you have the president's support. It would mean a lot to him politically, right?
Of course.
And they were both Yoruba, so that was something to also play into for his future ambition.
Muslims too.
Exactly. So those were things that people did not really reconcile with early enough. So when people started seeing that these people are more, I mean, at some point, Abacha did a national confab for people to come and discuss Nigeria's progress, where people were lamenting that they were just going to the confab to go and eat, and they weren't really doing anything. Like Abacha would just, just pour money somewhere so that people are going to stop disturbing him. And if you insist on disturbing Abacha, you die.
I need people to understand this. People that didn't grow up in that era. This moment was a very scary period in Nigeria. I remember vividly. I lived in Nigeria. I lived in Ibadan. I grew up in Ibadan, and I remember I would see on our way to school. Sometimes we would see dead bodies on the road, on the side of the road. That was because maybe someone had already messed with a military guy and they just killed somebody. This was a very common experience back then. People were living in fear, and there were still people that were still going out to like protest. It was a very, very dicey period. At this point, my uncle had already gone back to the United States. Because at that point they had said, looking for people that were like agitators. At some point, I think even Tinubu himself ran back to the United States, right?
Yeah, Tinubu had he escaped through this border. And okay, to put that period in perspective, right? Nigeria's evangelical ministry, the churches that we have today in Nigeria, like Nigerians finally saying we need God, happened under Abacha. Yeah. Abacha oppressed Nigerians so much that they gave up on protests, that they gave up on fighting for anything. They just said, you know what, only God can judge this man. And that was when Nigerians became really, really strong.
That was when we became
Pentecostal Christians.
Fanatics. That was when churches would just start popping up everywhere. You're right.
Exactly.
You're right. Exactly. We were never really that like fanatical about God and church, and we weren't like that. But during his regime, we were in such fear that was the only thing that kept people from losing their minds. We needed some kind of hope, and that's why a lot of people say religion acts like a opium to the people sometimes. When you're out of options, this was a man that was saying, "Look, I'm not going anywhere." Like he ran things with an iron fist, and you're right. I'd never thought about that, but that was the period when Nigerians really started getting religious, and you found more people being fanatical about their religion, and it has plagued us till today. But yeah, I want to quickly touch on this. So this was after MKO had gotten arrested. I think this guy was still in denial. Listen to this BBC audio of him right after he got arrested in June 1994. 1 second.
What is happening at your house? Are you being arrested?
I'm being arrested. I'm just going out now with the police.
Hello?
There's a large crowd here. And I was being escorted out to detention by singing the national anthem.
Why are they arresting you?
They are arresting me on an allegation of felony, nameless treason or something like that. They're not doing anything, they're just taking me away. Please let me go. I'm delaying them.
And so where are you now? Are you in your car?
I'm in my car now.
Is it police who are with you in your car, or are they escorted?
Yes, the commissioner of police is in the car with me, and my senior wife is in the car with me.
Why are they letting you talk on the phone to the BBC while they're in the middle of arresting you?
They have come to arrest me, not to arrest my mouth.
You sound very cheerful about it, Chief Abiola.
Of course. It is all part of democracy here.
And you're happy to go to the police and await whatever charges they're going to file against you?
I'm not in any way disturbed by it. Any sacrifice is in order. If it will bring democracy, peace and prosperity to Nigeria.
Is it possible to talk to the Commissioner of Police who's with you in the car?
I don't know if the Commissioner of Police is authorized to talk. He cannot talk to the press.
What is your advice now to your supporters, many of whom we heard a moment ago?
Well, I told them before I left home to just stay
So you're appealing for calm. You don't want them to take any direct action in your support.
No.
You still say you're the president of Nigeria, but it's not much good if you're going to be in jail.
Well, Mandela was in jail for 27 years. Kenyatta was in jail. I suppose that is one of the qualifications you need in this part of the world. No.
Error. That was his. I think that there was an
Mandela
error.
was in jail. Imagine likening your
Error.
Mandela.
Error.
Like, come on.
And this is with Abacha in power. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Just another.
So I keep thinking about it. Like, Akinyemi, what could this man have done? Look, let's assume he made all those mistakes. But at this point, when he got arrested, what could he have done differently to avoid his eventual permanent detention? From that point, because I still feel like he could have walked some of that back and somehow finessed his way out of it. But this man was on there talking to an international organization, BBC, about being the Nelson Mandela.
Look at it. You imagine the ridiculousness. But I think that is something that's privileged Nigerians need to understand, right? Everybody else is fair game. If you have privilege in Nigeria, you have to either use it or you shut up.
Yeah.
And Abiola at every point had the opportunity to use his privileges.
Yes.
He had done a lot of bad. He had done a lot of morally inept things. But Abiola at that point had the choice of using his influence with his friends,
Yes,
to save Nigeria, to become a savior in a way that would, immortalize him and wash off his previous errors, right?
Mm-hmm.
But instead of doing that, this man just kept on dilly-dallying and playing left and right. He wanted to be cool with the military and be cool with the people. And that wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to work. So
even while in
even when he
detention,
was under house arrest.
Yes, talk about it.
People were mobilizing. Like there were different times when, and this was where Diya had problems with. Like this was the very first problem that he had with Abacha.
Yeah.
So even while Abiola was in detention, people like Diya were pulling strings to get Abacha released. The only condition to get MKO released, the only condition was, when you get released, you have to shut up for a while. That was the only condition. No press conferences, no nothing. Just shut up for a while. Let Abacha. This guy is your friend. You know what he's capable of. He killed your wife while you were. Like, come on, man.
Can you imagine?
All you had to do was just shut up.
Kudirat. Assassinated. And the guy. By the way, the guy that assassinated her allegedly is still running for president right now, isn't he? Isn't that Mustafa guy?
Yes, Hamza al-Mustafa.
Yeah, Hamza al-Mustafa. It wasn't him, but it was one of his guys. That
man. Oh God, I can't remember.
I forgot his name.
But he was a funny English nickname.
Yeah.
So
but his wife died. Kudura got assassinated. But there were still times that Abiola was extending sympathy to Abacha. Wasn't there was that quote?
Abacha lost his child, and
yes.
MK was writing letter and saying, "Yeah, sorry and condolences to my friend. This person has you locked down. This person is picking off people on the road." And for people who grew up in Nigeria at that time, I think a lot of them, definitely people who grew up especially in Lagos, Abuja at that time, a lot of them must have been traumatized by seeing dark tinted Peugeot 504 cars or 504 and 505 cars, because you are going on the road, the next thing there's a dark tinted car by your car, and the next thing the glasses come down and it's bullets blazing. That was how they killed Kudura. That was how they attacked like lots of people in that period.
A lot of people.
You are just going on the road, and the next thing a car comes beside you, glasses come down, and it's guns blazing like it's the West.
His name was Sergeant something. I forgot his name, but he was notorious. He was one that carried out a lot of the assassinations. He was a beast. Man, it's really unfortunate. And then, fast forward to, like we mentioned earlier, Nigeria was going through this really turbulent period. Abacha was being a tyrant. He was the worst dictator that we had ever come across up until that point. And I think Sergeant Rogers, that was his name. Sergeant Rogers. He was their assigned assassinator. That was, and he got pleasure from doing this stuff. Like this guy was a sick bastard, man. I remember reading up like stories about him at the time. He was just a sick guy. He enjoyed killing people.
People like Sergeant Rogers were created by the paranoia that Babangida was feeling after the Gideon Oka coup.
Mm-hmm.
So they started creating tons and tons of military divisions, intelligence agencies, and a lot of those agencies were reporting directly to Abacha because that was the only person they could trust in government. And that was one of the reasons he did not want Abacha to leave power.
Yeah.
So you had you would have people with clearance levels that even people in the military council were not aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So even you in the military council might get assassinated by some of these people without you even knowing what's going on. So even people who are in the military echelons could not talk about certain things.
Yeah.
Because you don't know who was, and that was exactly what happened to Diya, right? When they were planning to take so after Diya, what Diya did wrongly first was that they set up they ferried a judge to sit on a case to grant Abiola bail.
Mm-hmm.
They did everything possible, got in new lawyers, Ganifa and co-intervened. Like they had lots of people sitting down and trying to, just get Abiola out of detention. I mean, if Abiola was a symbol of something, and if he was going to keep being in detention, it would dampen the spirit of Nigerians. But get out, let people know that there's hope.
Yeah.
Travel to the United States, go meet your friends, do some chilling, and then you can start protesting from the United States, get some support, rally people from the West, and come back home. But instead, that man was doing so I think Abiola was trying to overcompensate at that point. He realized he had messed up and he wanted to do, I'm not going to run away and leave my people, even though he had abandoned those people a long time. So at that point, it was Diya who was shipping in judges to get his bail set. At some point, there was this court sitting that the judges could not decide on Abiola because all the judges had interest. Abiola had accused them, Concord had accused them that they collected bribes. And that in law, you're not allowed to sit on cases that you have personal interest with the person involved. Yeah. So most of the judges of the Supreme Court at that point of the court, so they all had issues with Abiola. And instead of appointing new judges, Abacha refused. Abacha did not. All of these things were things that Diya was trying to resolve and get some people to just do some things on that. And
Diya was under a lot of pressure too from his people.
Yeah, it was
a lot of pressure.
So
they were always coming to his house to stop him. Yeah.
Diya is Yoruba, right? Diya is Yoruba. Diya is from Ogun State, where Abiola is from.
Yes.
And Diya was also Abacha's VP. And at that point, not even at that point, at any point in Nigeria's history, Ogun State has been the state that has produced the most intellectual people in the Kuti families are from Ogun State. We have Shoyinka. So you had people like Bekora, some Kuti, you had Wole Shoyinka and Kongi and likes on Diya's neck, pressuring this man to do something. You had Obasijo Ade, the Oni of Ife, you had the Ogun State monarchs. Everybody, they were all on Diya's neck saying, get our boy out. And the boy they wanted to get out was saying, no, look at me, I'm chilling, no, don't stress me. And that really was what caused, that was the beginning of Diya's downfall, leading to Diya. Diya was embarrassed out of the military.
Yeah.
Like, Abacha released a footage of Diya prostrating and begging in. Then Diya was they messed up there. But that's a different story.
There's a whole
they really messed up there.
So but eventually I think we can all assume that America made a move on Abacha. That's speculation. We don't know, but the speculation is that the CIA may have orchestrated the demise of Abacha. He was having sex with a bunch of prostitutes and he somehow wound up dead. So
I've written about Abacha. It's also in the series.
It's in the series. We have to explore, man. We have to explore these things some more.
Yeah, because of Abacha's mysterious nature. I mean, this guy was in power since 1966 July,
Yes.
and down till his death in 1998, people barely knew this man was on TV 3 times to make announcements. And the other times he spoke to Nigerians. He wasn't even speaking to Nigerians. He had interviews with BBC, and it was BBC that was now telling Nigerians that, in fact, when Abacha died, it wasn't even Nigerian outlets that broke the news. Abacha had been buried before Nigerians knew that Abacha had been buried.
Oh wow.
Abacha's corpse had gotten to Kano. They had buried him using the Muslim rites.
I remember I remember hearing it on Voice of America, because I remember that morning to when my mom found out. It was Voice of America that had reported it, and we were all ecstatic. There were people dancing in the streets, man. It was something else.
So yeah, so that's really just what it was. So you just had this mysterious figure that people barely knew jack shit about, just doing things, and so it wasn't smart. It was just silent. And Abacha was a womanizer. It was, but because people did not know about Abacha, yeah. So all those things, him doing drugs, him always.
Yeah, we didn't know any of that.
The reason Abacha always had dark shades on, the kind of party Abacha was Abacha, Buhari, Babangida, they were party riders. People were, look at them forming Sharia and whatnot. These people are big time ballers. So even the night Abacha died, Abacha used to do one thing when he was before his death, right? Abacha would tell you that he's coming to Lagos tomorrow. They would send a motorcade to Lagos to wait for Abacha.
Paranoid.
Abacha would not get out of bed that day. He was just going to sleep through the day. Sometimes Abacha would be in the presidential via, and they would fly they would roll down the flag to indicate that the president was not, the head of state was not around. They just liked doing those random things. So the day Abacha died, that was the day Abacha wanted to be president for life, and at that point, he wanted to get some legitimacy from the West.
Okay.
Because he had done a lot of things. He had murdered people. He killed Ken Saro-Wiwa, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Killed Saro-Wiwa, killed tons of people, got kicked out of the Commonwealth. He went to Liberia. Abacha was insane, though. Abacha was in Nigeria oppressing people, murdering people every day, and he went to Liberia to fight for their democracy.
Madman.
Insisting that Liberia must be a democratic nation. And this man was in Nigeria.
Terrorizing his people.
In Nigeria, terrorizing people. So Abacha was looking for some form of legitimacy, right?
Yeah.
So the day Abacha was at the party overnight, and the morning of Abacha's death, he was supposed to be at an event where there were political parties in Nigeria. I wanted to do the Babangida formula where he would announce political parties, and then they would announce flag bearers that would, be his guys. But unlike Babangida, the two parties were going to announce that Abacha was their candidate.
Yes.
Then they will announce that they're announcing the merger, then it's going to be a single party state.
And
then he becomes president, and the single party state, and then becomes president for life using a constitution.
Can you imagine?
So that was the plan. Right. So the morning of his death was the day that the parties, in fact, they had announced some whatever, they were waiting for him at the event. People were at the event. He was supposed to be the guest speaker. So they were going to invite him as a guest speaker to that event. He would come and they would all pretend, wow, look at him, he's so eloquent. Now this is our president, this is the person this is our solo candidate. But people were waiting at the event throughout the day while they were burying Abacha in Kano.
Wow.
So those people
they had no idea.
People were there waiting for Sani Abacha to, show up so they can move on with the plans and whatnot.
They had no idea.
Meanwhile, Abacha had already suffered the heart attack overnight.
Wow.
And he had died, and people thought, wow, Baba is coming out tomorrow to come and announce or more.
All right, wait, so do you have any theories for what really happened? Is it possible that he really just had a heart attack from all the partying and all the drinking and all that stuff?
To be honest, that was very plausible. I mean, this guy was always on drugs, he was always partying, he was always chilling. So yeah, it was possible that he suffered a heart attack, right? The theory that, of course, he was a womanizer, but that particular night, he wasn't womanizing.
Okay.
He was just partying and he went to bed to sleep. In fact, the last person that saw, so people suspect the person that they point fingers to was the last person that saw him alive. And the last person that saw Abacha alive was one of Abacha's closest friends. They went to primary school, secondary school. They basically grew up together. But unlike Abacha, those guys, they slowed down in their ranks because they did not fight as much battle. And,
Okay.
Abacha's childhood friend was
Mhm.
I can't remember the man's name right now, but it was one of those top military officers, but who was not like a full star general like him.
Yeah.
So that person was the person that last saw Abacha. In fact, they were, guys now, they were just laughing and gisting, and he saw Abacha off to his room to go
Yeah.
sleep.
Yeah.
And this man slept off and left. So the next morning, Abacha's aide, I think it was Hamza Al Mustafa, or it definitely wasn't Rogers. Rogers was not.
No, it wasn't.
I think it was Hamza.
Yeah, I think
So it was
Mustafa.
Hamza that went to meet Abacha to wake him up for the morning that work don't start though.
Mhm.
So Hamza got to the room and Abacha was not Abacha. So he called Dr. Wali. That was the physician, the presidential via physician.
Yes.
So Wali came and by the time Wali got there, said, Baba don't go.
Yeah.
So they just declared that this guy don't die. So what Hamza did was, instead of announcing that Abacha had died, everybody resumed for duty the same day way they would.
Yes.
The operations were going. If you had letters to deliver, you would just go on. They just brought in cars. They informed his immediate family. In fact, a lot of his close friends didn't know. Even the person that they said killed Abacha, he heard that Abacha died on TV.
Oh,
that was
wow.
his friend that saw him last.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people did not know. They just ferried his body, set the presidential plane, flew him to Kano, buried him, and that was when they were now looking for someone in the interim,
Yes.
someone that was harmless in the interim to present to Nigerians. So it was within 48 hours that they made that decision to now bring in. I mean, it wasn't straightforward anyway. There was still lots of political and military, or I senior you, or whatever that was going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, they decided that it was the most harmless person that they could think of was Abubakar Abdul Salam. So they now, so they brought in Abubakar Abdul Salam with his fine face and accent and everything. And so that was when they now went to release them. Obasanjo and Kuti had been in prison. Yaradua, the man that was having issues with MKO in their party.
Yes.
He had died then.
Yeah.
They allegedly was poisoned. He was injected with the HIV virus and he died in prison. But because he was a Muslim, his family refused autopsy.
Oh, wow.
So they just let him die. But he was definitely murdered. Yeah. Obasanjo would have been murdered too, but Obasanjo might not be a fighter, but he was a smart as MF.
He was.
So, he was. And they said, yeah, juju.
So for some reason, I always heard the rumor that Abacha died having a threesome. Like I always heard these rumors, but it sounds like that wasn't necessarily true. Okay. And there's also rumors that he may have been poisoned by CIA, but there's really nothing that has been verified by that. However, after Abacha died, then Abiola obviously was still there groveling, sending his condolences. Like, I
think they even took some time before informing that crackhead MKO, because nobody wanted this trouble. Nobody just wanted to do it. So when after Abacha died, they just moved him to a safer location because they didn't want. In fact, the house they moved him to was just one random house here in Abuja.
Okay.
And the house just had like 3-4 security guards. They just did not want attention or anything for him. But yeah, of course, when he knew. So and this was I think 8 years.
Yes.
Was it up to 8? No, it was not up to 8 years. It was about 5 years or so. It was 1993.
Yeah, 5 years.
So that was 5 years
after
yes. So even if he had been president, even if this guy had been president, his first term would have ended.
Yes.
But Abiola heard that Abacha was dead, and this man was already talking about, talking to his friends and getting his mandate back. Bro, move on.
Yeah, I think he had this idea that he was still going to be president. I mean, how much of
Kofi Annan was United Nations Secretary General at that point. There are people like him interfering and saying, "Okay, let's set this man free, but let Nigeria." And Africa was looking up to Nigeria.
Yes.
South Africa was coming out of apartheid, which Nigeria had heavily supported them at getting the emancipation.
Yes.
You had Liberia, even though Abacha was a bitch ass in his way. You had Liberia. I've cursed a lot on your podcast.
No, it's fine. No. This is a curse.
Okay. So you had all these people saying, "My guy, just move on with your life." And then this man was saying, "Yeah, so order of business. Write a letter to Abacha's family condoling them." Item number 2. Where is my presidency? Like, nigga, what?
It's 5 years later, man. Like, do you understand what's going on? Your life is still in danger. You're not free yet. And okay, now, and this is where things get weird. He gets visited by American dignitaries. One of them happens to be Susan Rice, and there's someone else.
Yeah, Susan Rice. Yeah.
And there's also a rumor that she may have possibly been the one that poisoned MQ, all allegedly, nothing confirmed. But for some, apparently they drank coffee. They said Abiola drank tea, right? And he collapsed. So we know Abiola was definitely poisoned. We know that for a fact. Who did it is what is still something that's not very, very clear. Some people have alleged the US were behind it, but that doesn't really seem likely because the US liked Abiola. And so, like, what would you say is probably the most plausible reason for Abiola's death?
So, firstly, I need to go soon. Secondly,
All right.
about Abiola's death, I think even though the US liked him because of, I mean, it would have been an economic advantage for them, especially because of his alliances with I.T.T. I.T.T. would bring money to the United States now.
Yes.
But it was really simple. His time had gone.
Yeah.
Even though it might seem sadistic saying it, but I think killing Abiola was the right thing to do.
Really?
Because Abiola would prevent a smooth transition back to democracy.
He was going to get in the way.
He would want to be named, and things had changed. Things were different. So I understand that people might say, that was extreme, but come on, this one was not willing to move on.
Yeah, but I can't bring myself to say he deserved to be killed. I can't do. I can't endorse that. I don't think any man deserves to be killed for anything. I understand. I mean,
at least eliminated out of the equation, you know.
Yes, I understand. Politically, it made sense for Abiola to not be around. Maybe there was something that could have been done. Maybe he could have been moved. Maybe he could have been exiled. Whatever it was, even though he would have still been. As the one thing we know, that Abiola would have never led up on that presidency. That thing was like it was his birthright. But he eventually got eliminated. I think the most plausible answer is that the military decided to just take care of him because that was the cleanest way that they could do it.
Abiola he had his own gym. Despite the fact that it was on lockdown. He had his gym and he was working out. And he had this person who would taste his food before he ate anything.
Food taster.
And that guy was just mysteriously not available.
The one time his food taster wasn't there, that was when he collapsed and died.
They invited that guy to the Okuta channel panel, and Baba he was doing one kind, but I mean, it was obvious that he knew something, right?
Yeah.
But
it was a setup. It had to have been a setup. And we'll never really truly know, which is unfortunate. But I know I've kept you for a long time. I just have one last question for you before you go. I don't want to keep you for too long. So my question to you is this, right? What are the lessons of MKO Abiola? What would you say are the lessons of MKO Abiola's ascension and like lessons that we can learn from that we can still apply till today for Nigeria as a whole?
Nigeria really does not care about teaching people lessons. Nigeria just wants to show you shege. But in MKO Abiola's case, I think it was pretty simple and straightforward. You live by the sword, you die by the sword.
Yeah.
You can't benefit from something and then castigate the thing and
you can't bite the hand that feeds you.
Exactly. So I mean, if you had shut up, his other co-conspirators, Babangida is still alive and chilling. There's no karma, so to say. You just have to know when to shut up and when to move on. Mm-hmm. Babangida could have insisted on staying as president, and Abacha might have had to, take him out.
Yeah.
But he knew that his time was up, and Baba just did interim national ING and disappeared. So Abiola knew. I'm sure that Abiola knew when he was supposed to have shut up and run away or do something else with his life. I mean, even people that had lesser things to lose, like Tinubu, they even left.
Yeah.
So
Do
he could have just shut up at some point and focus on other things, and But
do you
he
think we
wanted
would have
to
been better off today if MKO Abiola became president versus now?
No, I do not.
You think it would have
I
been
do
worse
not.
off? You think he probably
I do
would
not.
have probably just raided coffers just like every
I
other?
think Abiola would have ruled Nigeria the way he would have treated Nigeria the way he was treating. And the problem with Nigeria in the 70s and 80s was we had lots of money. I mean, at some point, Nigeria bought so much cement that we could not. That was after the Civil War. We bought so much cement that there was no place at the Ipupa port to put the cement. So the cements were there's a name for it in maritime business. The cements were on water for a long time. They were on the ship. So we were paying demurrage to those shipping companies. That was how rich Nigeria was at the oil boom period. So if MKO had become Nigerian president, at some point he would have just treated it the way he was treating his own businesses. Talk to my friends, resolve it internally, spray money at problems instead of addressing it structurally. Things that you can't resolve, you get someone to figure it out for you and all of that.
But I feel like he would have been able to build industries, though. He would have been able to build up a lot of our industries. He was a very, very astute industrious man.
On that part, Abiola is industrious. I mean, it was a really, even though there are moral questions, but Abiola was a capitalist to the core.
Yeah. So
we could have witnessed the rise of tons of companies coming to Nigeria.
Yes.
But what has mad Nigeria's politics and what made Obasanjo very, very important in 1999 was the fact that Nigeria's politics up till today has been soiled by Nigeria's military history. That's the years of the regime years has soiled Nigerian history. The people were getting assassinated. Bolagi was in his house when he was assassinated.
Yes.
So all the guns and the money that they got from the military era, they brought it into the Fourth Republic, and that is still carrying Nigeria till today. So Abiola would have had that issue with powerful people. They would say the owners of Nigeria. Yes. Abiola would have had that issue with the owners of Nigeria.
Would have to escape them. There's no way.
They would have had problems. They would have probably just killed him in office or something anyway, or made him redundant by planting people in his government the way they were going to do with the VP situation.
Yes. Yeah.
So he might have had plans, and there are a lot of things that Obasanjo did that he was able to get away with because Obasanjo was a military man and he had connections. I do not know any Nigerian living today who has as much connection as Obasanjo. When Obasanjo was locked by Babangida, you had American president saying, "Oh boy, free this guy now." Yeah. You had United Nations leader. I think MK was on that pedestal, but because the way the education level, their background, their exposure, the things that they've been involved in were different. And then of course, Obasanjo was a former military ruler too, so he had that going on for him as well. And it was easier for Obasanjo to reform Nigeria's military to an extent than it would have been for, say, MKO, some to corrupt political guy to come and I mean, you had people like David Mark who were top guys in the military saying that they would kill MKO Abiola if he were announced president. So and I'm sure that he wasn't the only person in the military who had sentiments like that.
Of course. Wow. Oh man, this was a great discussion, man. This was a great read. I can't wait to get into your other series. I hope that we can do this again for another one of the other series. I think this is really important for people of our generation to learn about our history. There's a lot of something that I was talking to my dad the other day, and he was telling me how at some point in the 80s they decided to cut off history lesson from school curriculums. And I didn't realize, because when I went to school, I remember there was never any history class. I didn't really think about it until I got to the United States and I saw that people had history courses, history classes. And I'm like, why did they do that? And it was really to cut us off from what really happened during those days.
It was to make the whitewashing easy.
Yeah, to make it easy. And I realized how underserved we are. And people like you're so important to our generation today, because we have to start documenting these things and really have to start sharing them with one another to understand where we're coming from. just so that we can understand where we're headed. And one thing I've noticed about Nigeria is that it's almost like everything keeps going in cycles. You know, we always have that. We have that coup, and then we have the presidency that comes in, and then they mess things up, and then we have it's almost like constant over and over and over again, and we never seem to learn our lesson. And I'm hoping that maybe our generation could be the ones to kind of maybe change the trajectory. But in order to do that, we need to have a good understanding, not the whitewashed version, but a real understanding of what our history is about. And for that, I really commend you, and I appreciate you for your works. I'm gonna leave you on that note here. I know you. Yeah, we spent a lot longer time than we anticipated. But I really appreciate you, Akinyemi. And with that, I bid you goodbye. I hope we can do this again. I'll reach out to you again. I hope I can.
Thank you very much, Samuel. I'll look forward to the next session.
All right, and I'll make sure to send you the links once I'm done editing these podcasts. But
okay, no problem.
With that said, I bid you goodbye, and you have a great weekend, sir.
Yeah, you too.
All right, sir. Bye. All right, yeah, that was an awesome interview. But I'm gonna leave you with this record before I go. Man, whew, that was deep. This is a Fela record. I had to, of course, now we have to leave you with this record because it wouldn't be right if we didn't. But thank you all for listening. I hope we can do this again sometime with our boy Akinyemi.
If I deny you, you go see punish me. Make if I they punish me, make you do my punish me. Make you land they punish me, make you do my punish me. I read down for bookie you, I see some myself you. Welly you, well. Welly you, well. Now true I want to talk again you. If I deny you, go see punish me. Make if I they punish me, make you do my punish me. Make you land they punish me. I read down for bookie you. I see some myself you. Welly you, well. Welly you, well. Now true I want to talk again you.
Well.
If I deny you,
well.
go see punish me.
Hey. Yo, don't forget to follow us, man. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on YouTube. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button, the ding on the side, so that you can get all of our notifications. If you want more content like this, please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, send me emails. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. Follow.
Long time ago. African man will not they carry sheets. Long time ago. They shit inside big hole. Long time ago. For Yoruba land in Ashalanga. Long time ago. For Igbo land in Unusi. Long time ago. For Hausa land in Asaluga. Long time ago. For Ga land in Tiafi. Long time ago. For Ashanti land in Ayani. Long time ago. For Ethiopia land in Sagarabet. Long time ago. For Kikuyu land in Chocho. Long time ago. For Bemba land in Chimbuzi. Long time ago. For Tonga land in Ichibunzi. Long time ago. Long time ago. Long time ago. African man will not
They carry sheets.
long time ago. We they shit inside big hole.
Hey.
Long
time ago.
Long time ago. Before them come force us away as slaves. During the time them come force us away as slaves. The European man na him they carry shit. Now for them culture to carry shit. During the time them come colonize us. Them come teach us to carry shit. Long time ago. African man we know they carry shit. European man teach us to carry shit. Many foreign companies they are all our money go. Many foreign companies, they Africa carry all our money go. Them go write big English for newspaper, Dabaru, we Africans. Them go write big English for newspaper, Dabaru, we Africans. I read about one of them inside book like that, them calling him na I.T.T. I read about one of them inside book like that, them calling him na I.T.T. Them go they cause confusion, cause corruption, cause oppression.
Tell him.
Cause inflation.
Tell him, fella.
Cause oppression.
Hey.
Cause confusion.
I'm sorry, man. I just had to interject on this one.
Cause inflation. Cause oppression. Cause confusion. Cause inflation. Cause oppression. Oppression. Inflation. Corruption. Oppression. Inflation. Them get to one style way that they use. Them go pick one African man.
Listen.
A man with low mentality.
Listen carefully, people.
Them go give you ₦1,000,000 bread to become of high position here. Him go bribe some ₦1,000 bread to become one UC chief. Like rat they do, them go they do from corner,
Bossy,
corner, passy, side, passy, up, corner, passy, yonder, passy, side, then he gradually, then he gradually, them go be friend to journalist, friend to commissioner, friend to permanent secretary, friend to me.
He's talking about MKO Abiola, man. Yo, he's taking shots right now.
Start them corruption, start them inflation, start them oppression, start them confusion, start them oppression, start to steal money, start to steal money like Obasanjo and Abiola. I.T.T. International Rook. International Thief. We go fight them well. We don't tire
To carry anymore them shit. We don't tire to carry anymore them
shit. We don't tire to carry anymore them shit.
Yo, like I said, don't forget to follow, man. And please, if you want more content like this, let me know. I'll get it for you, man. This is what I do. Man. This was a brilliant conversation. I appreciate you guys have supported me up until this point. I was looking forward to this particular one. I was excited for it, and I can't wait. I really can't wait to really present this to the world, man. But please, like I said before, don't forget to follow us on YouTube. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like, comment, share with your friends. We need to get our numbers up. Anything to pretty much get us exposure, please do, because it goes a long way. Thank you for listening.